It's somewhat ironic that we're leading the technology panel and we've struggled with technology over the last 2 days just for our audio visual. So thank you all for being here. I'm super excited about this panel, as I know many of you are. I've had several folks come up to me kind of in the breaks and everything and say, I can't wait for this one. I'm really excited. And that's part of the reason I jumped in yesterday to say, let's not ask Sebastian all the tech questions. Let's wait till tomorrow till we have the team up here and not steal their thunder. Part of the reason I'm on this panel is that I spent the last 4 years with Army Futures Command, leading their threat team for the Futures and Concept Center. So everything from the big Future Studies program, Army Title 10 game, all the way down to getting into the Maneuver Center Battle Lab and doing entity level models and simulations on the threat side specifically. And so it's super exciting to see what we should be able to do in the future to enhance this community, both from a professional wargaming aspect, but also from a hobbyist wargame and how the two can complement one another. So the way I'm going to run this panel is that I'll introduce all 4 panelists here right up front so that I can shut up and be done and let them share their expertise. We'll go down the line and we'll finish off with down at the end there with Vladimir and team from what I think is going to be a super exciting presentation. So to begin with, to my right, Dr. Wong is Section Supervisor for Strategy and Policy Analysis within the Johns Hopkins University APL's National Security Analysis Division. She's also an adjunct professor at the Georgetown University Walsh School of Foreign Service, where she teaches on artificial intelligence and policy. She is also the founder and president of the Women's Wargaming Network. She was previously a wargamer at both the Institute for Defense Analysis, where she was the technical advisor on IDA Wargame Incentive Fund portfolio work, and at RAND Corporation, where she was co-director for the RAND Center for Gaming. She led the design team for Hegemony, a game of strategic choices, which supported the 2018 U.S. National Defense Strategy. She's also often an organizer for the Connections Wargaming Conference, which I know many of us have been a part of, and co-chaired 2 Military Operations Research Society special meetings on wargaming. Kevin Williamson is a wargame thought leader with background in Army logistics before returning to service as a gunner's mate with the United States Navy Reserves. He then went on to leave the U.S. Navy to pursue a position with Matrix ProSim, supporting the Marine Corps University's professional military education via the Wargaming Department, serving as wargame subject matter expert with extensive experience using cloud technology for wargaming and distributed learning environments from September of 22 to June of 24. Currently holds a position as engagement manager with Battle Road Digital, as well as part-time consultancy work for the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Additionally, he holds several wargaming and defense-related positions, including Wargaming Program Development Director at USA Fight Club, under the direction of NATO Shape Strategist Colonel Arnell David, Executive Director of his own nonprofit organization, Near Peer Simulations, which serves as a free virtual alternative to broaden wargaming exposure. His work includes pioneering the interactive tactical decision game concept, which pairs traditional TDG scenarios with data-informed commercial off-the-shelf wargaming products, currently being explored by the Marine Corps Association, as well as generative AI and large language model integration into PME wargames. Thank you, sir. Jason M. Jones is the Defense Program Manager for Matrix ProSims, a commercial military strategy gaming company with a range of gaming software for use by defense professionals. Prior to this position, Jason was a U.S. Army simulation officer with experience in constructive simulation of logistics, land combat, and air and missile defense, and live simulation training as an observer controller of the U.S. Army's National Training Center. His final assignment before retirement from the U.S. Army was Deputy Director of NATO Modeling and Simulation Center of Excellence. Jason holds a master's degree in modeling, simulations, and virtual environments from the Naval Postgraduate School, where his thesis was on using commercial gaming software to train infantry squads. And finally, Dr. Billy Berry and team. Dr. Berry is Professor of Emerging Technology and Principal Strategist of the Artificial Intelligence Intelligence Augmentation Program for the Center for Strategic Leadership at the United States Army War College. Before working at the War College, Dr. Berry was a visiting professor of philosophy and just war theory at the United States Military Academy. A pioneer in human AI and IA teams, he is the first to introduce AI-powered intelligent augmentation androids, robots, digital virtual beings, and strategic advisors as teaching and learning partners in civilian university and PME classrooms. A sought-after TEDx and international keynote speaker, Dr. Berry's influence extends to Fortune 500 companies, global leadership symposiums, and conferences. His current research interest centers on non-invasive brain-computer interfaces, driving the conversation on ethical, technological interactions. Former artillery officer, just like the infantryman. His contributions to academia and industry established him as a leading authority on the future of human relationships with emerging technology. Thank you, Dr. Gray. So I know this took a while, but I thought it important to lay out the bona fides of this group, especially as we were going through such a really exciting and incredible field. So with that, Dr. Wong, welcome.
Thank you. I just also want to add that at APL right now, Applied Physics Lab, I'll also, APL has invested heavily in LLM-enabled tools for digital wargaming, and I will be over this next fiscal year doing some of the design and testing of war game designs that try to leverage them. So if you're interested in potentially being a tester, please leave me your business card. And also as a founder and president of the Women's Wargaming Network, I do have to say this is the most male audience I've addressed in my entire life. I've been doing it for decades now, okay? So just remember, in the United States, right, most college grads now are women. So just a reminder for everyone that you may want to access the skill sets and knowledge that women have. And remember, you can still pay them less.
You can't follow that.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. So as you can tell, I'm terrified of public speaking, so bear with me. So today I'll be presenting on the interactive tactical decision game, but also be presenting on something that might be a little controversial, but I've been assured that it's fun to talk about here. But I believe that there's an application to use wargaming for human intelligence purposes. And I believe that it's possible that it could already be happening, though I don't argue that it is. But that's what we'll be talking about.
Get your slides. Yeah, you're.
Oh, I'm presenting. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Sorry about that. Okay, yes. Good morning. So my name is Kevin Williamson. I'll be presenting on those few things today. So I'll go through it. Yeah, so this is my professional background. I only do it because I feel like I'm obligated to because I don't have a college degree. So when people look me up, I just want to let you know I put in work. So that's my background. And then because I'm terrified of public speaking, you know, I can't usually see these, but this is for today. I like dogs, so it just helps calm me a little bit. The one in the middle is mine. The one on the left is family dog, but we're not here to talk about it. So I'm going to move over here for a second. Sorry. So tactical decision games, in case you don't know, for the purposes of this presentation, it's going to be in a military context. So to me, wargaming can be anything, even just determining where you're going to go get gas for the day as you prepare distance or price. You know, wargaming is just the tool that you use. And so TDGs are a little antiquated. I'm not sure that anybody really still does them inside of P&E context, except maybe at West Point and some of the cadet schools. But I went to a presentation about 2 years ago. This gentleman gave it. The conference was called DSET. It's in England every year. But he gave a presentation on basically he wanted to know, he's involved in training Marines, but if a Marine asked him, hey, sir, how do I conduct a successful, I think it's a squad assault, he found that there was actually no doctrine or there was nothing actually standardized across the Marine Corps that he could tell them this is the way to conduct it according to the Marine Corps. And so I'm not going to make us go through all these slides, but basically he goes through manuals, training standards, the infantry schools, exercises, unit training, and combat experience to look for where do I conduct this squad assault. And again, this is just like, is it in our training standards, is it in our schools? And he gives various reasons why he doesn't think that there's actually a standardized squad assault. And he says, where else can we learn how to assault? And he says in simulation. So going back to the moderator's comment about good luck with the infantry, this is somebody who's actually trying to explore using wargaming as a tool for the infantry because he can't find the answer anywhere else. So, you know, you can read his, you know, statement here, but he basically goes off the Commandant's statement in 2019 about reps and sets. And so he uses Jason Jones' company software combat mission actually for this. I think it was Shock Force 2. And he basically sets up multiple scenarios with different variables. So whether the enemy's conscript trained, whether they've got fixed fighting positions or they're out in the open, whether they're fanatics and they fight to the end. And he basically collects all this different data on all these scenarios. And he says, okay, this might not tell me that this is the correct answer to tell that Marine squad, but it can give me the data to inform them on, what are our best options here. And so I basically took that concept. I still credit it to him. I don't necessarily think I came up with it. I think he just did the tabletop research version of it. But I basically said, okay, at MCU, one of the biggest friction points is the students don't have time to learn any of the digital software. So how do you facilitate a war game or an educational experience to them that it's a low lift, right? It's a very low lift for them. And so I came up with, well, why don't we just use combat mission and do the same thing? And so if you attended the game night last night, you would have seen combat mission being used in this concept. So credit goes out to Fight Club International over there with Rich and Rich. But I basically tested this in Fight Club and asked for a bunch of co-hosts. So the idea is you have a scenario and you can use pre-built scenarios. You just have to find the one that fits the context or the training objective. And I told the participants, I said, don't worry about how complex it is. Even if you're a civilian, you might not know, the correct orders format or whatever. It can be as simple or as complicated as you'd like. And so I got all kinds of responses. But what that told me was people actually felt encouraged to participate. And so this is actually one of the best responses I got. This is from a National Guard infantry captain who uses combat mission for professional development with his NCOs unit. And his name is Captain Colin Davis, just to give him the credit. But he actually went all the way through here. The scenario is played from the red perspective, just kind of throw for a loop. And he actually went in here and did it the way that he would do it in real life. And the slide that he gave me is a little bit bigger than this, but I wasn't going to bore you guys with that. So that's an example of how you can do a very low effort lift in that context. Here's another context of what I consider an interactive TDG. This is looking at anti-ballistic missile defense in Japan against North Korea. And so this is Command Professional Edition, which no shade towards Matrix, but it's very complex to learn. There's a 300 plus YouTube video playlist out there that we usually recommend people to look at when trying to learn. So how do I get people to be able to use Command without actually having to learn the game? Well, Command has Lewis scripting and a special action menu. So all the student needs to do is come in here and say, what do I want to defend Japan and what do I want North Korea to fire at them? And I try to make the actions repeatable if possible. That way they can just stay in the scenario and run multiple things. But again, it's another idea of how can I create a learning opportunity for PME where the students don't have to learn the system. And then this is just another way that if you absolutely hate digital and computer games and want nothing to do with them, you still use them at least to print out the maps and conduct the same thing, just in a tabletop way. And then this was something I was working on with Marine Corps Association. So this is my last point for why I think that interactive tactical decision games, I think should be required to be done, but obviously it's a difference of opinion. And my argument is this is actually a TDG about force design, South China Sea in the future, and no shade to anybody out there, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find an E7 that's got combat experience in the South China Sea with all the variables that we're talking about today. And so again, that does not mean that this concept is, hey, this is the answer, but it's a lot better than somebody just thinking about it. You can at least get the data to support the conversation. And this is an example of our software, Atom Engine. So I've been trying for a while to think about how could I scale out the TDG to an operational framing problem. And so this is just an example of something that I'm experimenting with for logisticians specifically. So I'm looking at operational scale problems. How do I ask a logistician, how do you disperse things? Where would you pre-position it and then run it for an extended period of time? This is a great resource if you want to do interactive tactical decision games, because I don't want to leave you hanging. Talk to me after this presentation. I'll hook you up the link. But it's basically just, if you don't know how to do anything with these digital products, It's basically a guy that a gentleman called Peter Robbins, who's also part of USA Fight Club, has built specifically for PME. So it's like a catalog of game. And now I'm going to talk about the controversial thing. So the first thing I'd like to do is, if you've ever played a war game, can you please raise your hand? Awesome. Keep them raised, please. If you've ever investigated the background of who designed the war game or who's organized it, please keep your hands raised. Okay, that's good. I will win that. So I didn't want to make the slides too long, and obviously I'm running low on time. So if you are interested, please talk to me afterwards, because I'll go very in depth with you like a TED Talk. This is an example of a staff exercise that happens at Fight Club International. It's just one example, but this is the one I decided to choose. And what you're looking at here is an open source communication platform called Discord. You're able to create text channels, you're able to create voice channels, and everything that you post in these channels stays there unless somebody on the server deletes it. So we run staff exercises that are open to anybody who wants to sign up. We try to do our due diligence. If something looks suspicious, we don't give you access to the Discord or software or anything like that. But it is an example of how these commercial off-the-shelf products that have data extraction capabilities paired with open source communication platforms, even going right down to, yeah, sure, I might not think that this is a classified battle plan, and I don't necessarily think it is, but what's most interesting to me is I can come on here and I can listen to an hour of people talk about what they think is the most dangerous and most likely. I can actually go and develop profiles based on the people, and the backgrounds in these discords vary wildly from active duty officers, lower enlisted, foreign policy people, people like myself. And so what I advocate for is, like, this isn't about trying to get classified data necessarily. It's about trying to understand the decision points that our adversaries might be looking at, or how they would employ something. Like, sure, we know that J-35 is cloned from us. We might understand what it can do and its limits and its capabilities, but do we understand how the person in charge of that air wing is going to deploy them? And I think that's what the value is here. And so this idea actually got spurred on from an article I read from USNI Proceedings about a year ago, I think. But it was on an article about China's wargaming in PME. And they have what's called a blue team. And the blue team basically is assumed to be, it's usually any Western force, but we think that they're primarily researching the United States. And their sole job is to research how we think so that they can fight like us in a red cell. And then when I go and I investigate Chinese defense companies, I stumbled across Huaxi Defense. And in 2017, I believe it may have been a little bit earlier than that, but 2017, they actually posted open source as stolen commercial software platform that is now being used professionally inside of our defense industry. But they basically stole it, cloned it, made it open source, put it on the internet, and said, hey, we're trying to do AI machine learning. We're just going to crowdsource and let anybody download this thing. I don't actually think that it's real. I think it might be propaganda, but the idea to me actually, it was just interesting because like if I wanted to crowdsource ideas and profiles of how people would think, sure, I would, put a link on the internet. And so when you think about things like War Thunder that you might be familiar with just from the news on the technical manuals being leaked, I think there is an overlap as these commercial war games and these digital war games start getting more popular and the younger generation grows up with them, that people like Jack Darrow, the airman that leaked classified information on Discord about the Ukrainian war. In my opinion, if you look at what the reasons behind why he did that, the reasons behind why people leak stuff on War Thunder, there's a little bit of overlap for it. It's because they know something that the developers or somebody in the public is getting wrong, and they want to appear smart in the know. And so when I look at, what's most at risk, it's wargaming communities, like Fight Club. I link PME to that because there's a lot of PME opportunities that we try to cater to for servicemen. I link academia right under that because the more sinister version of this is, I got asked to do a strategic crisis sim for Elliott School of International Affairs But that was just because somebody said, hey, I think this guy can do it. You know, if I wanted to, I could get an idea of what the next generation of, foreign policymakers for us are thinking. I don't know if that belong again. I've simplified this framework down really low, and I'm going to wait for Q&A to actually explain it. But that's where these emerging tech actually come into play, because once the singularity happens between implementing generative AI, large language models with these digital tools, it's going to be very easy for one person to create an entire StatX on their own and actually start executing with that. I know that was a little long, so I'm sorry, Jason.
Sorry.
Thanks so much. And sorry, I passed the mic before I was supposed to. And so I don't have slides, mostly because if there are no slides, there's nothing for anyone to review ahead of time. So I've actually been working a little bit on the intersection of AI and wargaming for a few years. So I led the workshop at Connections in 2020. It's about AI and wargaming. And just this past week, Journal of Defense Modeling and Simulation got back to me and said, hey, there were supposed to be a special editions and the individual articles have been published, but did you as editor of that special edition want to have an editorial? And I think I'm going to submit the editorial, a little piece introducing all of those various articles about what changes and what doesn't change with LLMs. Also, several years ago, I was chair for the Military Operations Research Society special meeting on AI and autonomy. And I've been teaching since 2020 at Georgetown about AI and policy. So I thought people were like crazy about AI before, and then ChatGPT dropped, and then like it went sort of insane. So I have my students, I give them references and said, okay, I know this is BC, right, before ChatGPT times, but like it's still worth knowing about. So some of my comments, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing in the field, especially with LLM specific, but then more general, because I want to take a step back. And I want to offer you a couple of different readings that I think are very good. And I have to do this as an adjunct professor. You get homework, right? Not slides, you get homework, right? No video games for you. Then it's going to go read, okay? That I think really are very, very helpful in understanding how you think about technology as it enters different spaces. So first off, again, back to what APL is doing. So APL is also hosting Connections this year. The Connections Wargaming Conference in July, and I'm working with them to see if we can have a module on introduction to LLMs for people who are interested, especially given APL's heavy investment on LLMs and wargames. So again, I'm also going to be doing how do you go about creating a wargame design that can leverage the tools that make sense. That's not just dropping a technology into a preconceived a notion of concept. So remember when machine guns were invented, they just thought of it as a variation of the cannon, so it couldn't swivel, right? It couldn't swivel left and right, which if you think about the way machine guns end up being used in the battlefield, right? The concept of employment for that machine when it first came out was extremely different from the way it evolved to take use of the technology. So even with LLMs, like there's a place that we think it'll go into wargaming, but we don't yet know. And so what we'll be doing there at APL is using design thinking, which I think several of you must be familiar with. And that was the approach used behind Gemini, which is the board game that the Pentagon asked for to support the 2018 National Defense Strategy. And Mike Linnett, also one of the key designers of that game, is in the audience. And that was Rand's first commercially available board game. By the way, my immigrant Korean parents do not know that this is what I do for a living. I've never been able to explain this to them. So very entertaining. But the idea there was to prototype with users. So as there's any technology introduced, I've seen many attempts at pushing technology into wargames fail because they independently develop the tools, and the people who develop the tools don't know how wargame participants or designers want it used, and it doesn't and then we miss out on maybe the advantages of the technology. So the idea here is just to repeatedly iterate, and again, if you're interested, in your cars. But a couple of things I do want to say, like right, we all know how the level of interest with LLMs has just gone through the roof. especially with ChatGPT. But I think the democratization of access to AI through that tool also means it's going to be very hard for someone to necessarily gain an advantage just through some level of access to ChatGPT because it's a technology that everyone has. So my first major point, so I'm going to give you a run for the money for talking too long. So technology is always changing, I'm going to say. So why did I give you this lengthy background into what we were working on, some of us on AI working before, which is it's not necessarily new. And then I wanted to, one of the things I was struck by in the previous section where the gentleman was talking about gaming, right? It's a personal gamer and come home and just does it. Well, these are sort of generational constructs. So Sebastian Bay and I, when we were both at RAND, wrote a RAND study called Next Generation Wargaming Courses of Action for the U.S. Marine Corps. And that was done to help inform the Marine Corps when they were still deciding the parameters of their new wargaming center down in Quantico. But in the appendix, there's a list of all of the tools, including a lot of the computer-based tools that the wargaming community at the time, we interviewed a number of centers and wrote them up. And these are tools that everyone identified. So that's a snapshot in time about 2016, 2017. But just to give you a sense of how much tools and computerized games have been a part of it, and if you go back even further to the 1970s, there are handbooks from the Military Operations Research Society that it's very computerized modeling and simulation, and they see that as an extension of sort of wargaming. But you see for the generational constructs, there's the way Gen X does interactive war games, which is very digital, right? But it's standalone because we grew up with consoles that were not networked. And then previous to that sort of gaming is the hex and counter games that people do in person. And then millennials is digital and networked. And then right after that with Gen Z, it's digital, networked, and mobile. Right. And then there's also an aspect of I like my 19-year-old college student and he watches videos of games play digital network games. And I'm like, I don't understand. Right. But to the extent to which some of the way we interact with technology is again based on our digital experience of this gaming and what feels natural to us, as well as the advantages of the technology is something to keep in mind. And because when we were doing that study for the Marine Corps, one person said, remember to design for the generals today, and if they don't like technology, they like to stay around and have a big map on the floor and point to the map and talk to each other that way. So remember who your user is as everything. But the second thing I really wanted to say is, I'm going to forget your first reading assignment, is Code Intelligence by Ethan Molly. So that is a book that I assigned to my Georgetown students who pay a lot of money for me to tell me things like this, right? So you're getting this for free. So there's just a flood of books that have come out about LLMs since ChatGPT dropped, and a lot of it is not helpful. Some of it is just sort of a big ad for OpenAI, and you have to think about it. Some of it is so ephemeral that I don't know if it's worth teaching people because it's going to change the next time there's another update of GPT, right? But that book is an excellent way of thinking about using it as a co-intelligence. And one of the points it makes is how something like ChatGPT can help humans who are not experts. So expert humans don't get as much out of being assisted by some of those as people who are really new to a field or who are not experts. But one of the ways you can use that is if you're new to wargaming, you can ask it, how should I approach wargaming? And then you can give it an example. So I said, what are some of the things I should consider when I'm designing a war game of climate change and logistics? What are ways you should update hegemony to game of strategic choices? Or you have an answer. Or if you have a specific problem, you say, okay, if you want to, you say, I need to design a war game about China invading Taiwan. You go, what are good places for China to do the amphibious landing on Taiwan? And it gives you a list. And you go, okay, why are these good landing places for the PLA? And then it gives you more text. And then you ask it to generate a map illustrating the landing sites. So if you're a war gamer, you've done in 30 seconds what might have taken you a long time. But to counter this is your second reading assignment called The Skill Code by Matt Beam. And this is an excellent book. So he talks about the pitfalls of incorporating technology in a very tangible way when he looks at the introduction of robotics into surgery. So here he says, in the short term, things like robots have made an expert human surgeon even better, right? But in what you've done is you've cut off the opportunities to assign grunt work to the new med students, right, who've just graduated and they're new doctors. They have no experience because there was a temptation to always step in and go, oh, if the patient's outcomes will be better with a skilled surgeon with the machine. And then so the next generation, they lose the opportunities for training. They lose the opportunities to have the mentor-mentee relationship. And you're seeing it already in wargaming. When I went to the NATO Win 24 Wargaming Initiative 24 in Germany, that was the 200th anniversary of Bridgefield. So it was very historic to be there in Germany. They were talking about using LLMs in wargaming to do things like summarize notes, to handle requests for information, and other grunt work. But those are all entry-level skills for when you're looking to train the next generation of wargamers. Those are the things you're giving them. And especially scenario writing with LLMs is one where you're taking advantage of the fact that it can hallucinate and not worried about accuracy. But that would be a traditional assignment would give someone who is new to wargaming. So we have to be mindful of that. So this is why I'm assigning you the two books, right? And then if you read both of them, come and tell me. I'd be very excited to see if you did. And so now I have spoken too long, and I will pass on.
All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm probably going to stand up, but if you're ever in a meeting with me and I'm not on camera, I'm probably walking around. So, I'm again, Jason Jennings. I work for a video game company. Lead for life. So a couple of things. So one of the interesting things, kind of coming into this, I was an Army simulation guy for a long time, did some different work in this. And as a defense program manager, I get a great opportunity to see a lot of different things that are being done with, in our case, really commercial off-the-shelf software. And so I'm going to go into that, but I want to touch on a point that's kind of come up over the last couple of days, either directly or somewhat indirectly, and that's training versus wargaming. And so really in this job, after 14 years, focus on training. And then 4 years in this, and in much more of the wargaming community, I've had a much better kind of realization of the difference. And you'll probably understand the difference as I say it. It's not super smart. But really training and training simulation are all about, accomplishing a specified mission. But when it comes to DoD and when it comes to the Army in particular, but all the services, those simulations really have one purpose: simulate a command and control purpose. It's a streamlined approach for giving orders to a larger formation than we might normally handle, but it's really about stimulating command and control because the training audience needs to participate on the system that they plan to go to war with, because that's training. That is a simulation for training purposes, and it is terrible to try and use it for war because it is not intended. When you are in the exercise control, where I've spent many years, you are trying to do it as fast and easy as possible. And that's your only goal. And so trying to turn that into a wargaming system, it's never going to work. And so when I talk about digital systems for wargaming, I'm not thinking about those. Who wants to use WarSim for a wargame? Yes. Who wants to use all video systems? And that is not the way to go. That's why when we've got into the business and we kind of got pulled into the DoD market from the commercial side, we bring kind of a different flavor to it because, as wargaming is intended for ideas, for thoughts. How do we come up with another way? How do we practice decision making? And frankly, a StaffX could be a great example of a wargame. But what we've done in the training and simulation, and even just as we are being trained, is we've built this condition that when we bring computers in, who needs to be on a computer? Everybody. That is not the case in a war game. That simulation, whether it's a commercial product, whether it's a tabletop, whether it's something else, it is the biggest mistake that everybody needs to learn how to implement the rules. That's why we have a facilitator. That's why maybe we have some other assistants. And I would submit that that is the same approach for a digital tool, whether it's a commercial game or something else, when you are going to wargame. And so I recognize that there's some consternation and concern maybe over wargaming with digital systems, but I think it's because we're looking at it through the training plans where everybody needs to be on a computer. And Kevin talked about tactical decision games, and if you haven't followed Kevin on LinkedIn, he really has some good stuff out there. He's done some interesting things, whether it's a tactical decision game or implementing a large language model that kind of generate some stuff kind of in the spirit of what we talked about. But just there are a lot of ways to do things. But when you do a war game with a digital system, it's just a different display. It doesn't happen to be on a table in front of you. But now we can take advantage of the digital capabilities. We can distribute. We don't all have to be in the same room. If we find a value in VR or AR, and maybe we're all around a sand table, I can snap everybody to one viewpoint. And so maybe now I'm using that technology to assist the message while still maybe letting everybody roam over the space. But now maybe I have some features that I can take advantage of. But again, get out of the idea from training, and it's really hard. And it really took me a couple of years in this job to see why there was so much consternation. And it's valid, but that's the difference. Don't put everybody on a computer, because that's why you don't have immersion in the same way that maybe you do when we're all sitting around talking. And so, Kevin mentioned, like our game Command, which was up on the screen, it's complicated. That's not easy. My guys are impressed when I open Command. And what I would say is, you need to have a facilitator in the same way that you would do for a tabletop game. So what we've done with Marine Corps University is we leverage an expert operator. So whether it's Kevin, his colleagues, some of our guys, somebody you train to use that software, essentially you're just creating an additional facilitator with that tool. And so find the advantages, and I would be the first to tell you if we're not a good fit, and I'm not trying to sell you, but a good, your good research on looking for a wargaming tool is going to involve figuring out, is this the right fit? And that goes back to our thesis work from years and years ago, which was what's the right game that we want to use to try and train infantry squads, or just to see if there's value. So that's ancient thesis work, and so it's still on a shelf somewhere, but it is out there, and so we have done it. So I'm going to step away from that and talk a little bit about technology. Actually, and Kevin could probably talk more about some of the work using AI. So we've seen work with different digital products, certainly large language models. I would submit, and you're right, I think when you talk about the skill code and the need for that lower level work, I think that's essential. But how many people have multiple folks in their wargaming shop? And that's the real challenge, I think, for most of us in services. It's just me, and I got to make this thing up. And so I need to lean on an LLM. And an LLM does not do a bad job of generating something. Now, this is my call to don't generate a book that's 200 pages long, either in an LLM or in person, because who's going to read that? Speaking for the Americans here. So that's my NATO statement on how much we read, what's been given to us. So I would say keep it short, keep it to the point, get the right stuff in there. That gives you the ability to edit it, review it, etc. And don't be afraid to put in something, and whether it's notes at the end. Like we generate data out of some of our simulations. And so you can feed that data in. It may come up with something useful. It may come up with nothing, but it is an option. We've also got some movement in generative AI. That's less about the wargaming, but there's been some interesting work on decision supporting tools. I know in my time in NATO, that was a high demand from SAC-T, so the ACP commander, which is where my AI tools. And I think other than Netflix and Amazon recommendations, I'm not sure we did a lot of AI in our life on a regular basis, although Vladimir may disagree with us in a few minutes. A couple other things, the cloud. And I don't know how many people are employing or using it. If you're not aware of what Marine Corps University did from a tools perspective, whether they were used for wargaming or just for entertainment gaming, Marine Corps University has sponsored not only a series of tournaments, but using their cloud-based, wargaming system. And so they keep different pieces of software in the cloud and run tournaments and other things and give people a chance to interact and do some of that training. Now, I will tell you from my work long ago and even now, the difference between I'm playing a game and I'm learning or I'm actually doing something active is making a plan. And that is at the core. And we see this at West Point as well. West Point uses some of the combat vision software that Richard was showing over in the corner last night as a training tool for tactics. And what's important in training tactics is not just start clicking. It's what's my plan? What am I trying to do? Thinking about the environment, the enemy, the terrain, where do I want to be? When do I want to be there? That is how you make effective use of a digital tool. Because you don't just put them on the machine and let them go. You need to actually use structure, discipline, and kind of that Army approach to how are we going to get this done and do something useful. And then the last thing I will throw out is, and it's somewhat, self-serving, but don't be afraid to look at commercial off-the-shelf stuff because there's a lot of potential and advantages in that. And it might fill a gap at a price point far below the time it's going to take for Warsim 2000 to finally be in service. And, I think my first exercise with Warsim 2000, which they got rid of 2000, was in 2012. So those things take a long time. And by the time they're built, they may be out of value. And so either keep it simple, keep it small, focus on what is a simple element for you and then build from there. And then some of those COTS tools have some extra capability that may not be prepared for. So do your research, identify your problem, and then treat it like any other military problem. Work through it, make a plan, follow up, get an AR. Thanks. I guess this is why I'm going to talk here.
Good morning. So every morning I wake up, I go downstairs and I get my coffee in the morning. And, instead of reading the paper or going to, catch up on the news, the first thing I do in the morning is I talk to my digital assistants. Tim here, he's 10 years old, right? Far before Transformers and all that kind of fun stuff, much more about decision trees and so forth. We got 10 years of my life every single day on it, right? And then Vladimir, I just started working on a month ago. The Vladimir uses a lot of psychological. So what do these things do? They're here, and why do I talk to them every morning? Why am I talking to robots in the morning? Is that these are avatars, but these avatars are also the AI thing. Right? They also control, frequently enough, a 5'9" robot that's at my house at home. So if some of you guys have Ring doorbell things, nothing's better than having a robot look out the window and say out the window, like, who are you? And you look up and there's a robot looking at you, right? That's pretty cool. But what's so different about when we look at the operational environment is the operational environment, we're looking at us as people. We're the operational environment of the next gen. Right? When I put this on in class, I can put this on here, right? And these are just X-ray glasses. Now, when I wear these in class, or if I'm doing something, I can see over all your heads, I'd be able to self-identify who you are, but I also can have every document open. So someone's talking about Clausewitz. So I got on page 175, paragraph 5. Clausewitz said this, whatever. You could be like, absolutely. And he also said this, and that. And then you'd have all these videos, and it's all coming through your ear, and you don't see it. So I wouldn't even need these on. I can have both of these guys in here talking in both my ears, give me advice as I'm making decision support, which is pretty cool. So we spend 2 hours in the morning talking to each other, re-indexing. So it's like a library of information right in their heads. And at night, we come home and then we do it again. And a lot of times that's much more than 2 hours. Like last night was an all-nighter, right? Because you're not getting it. So what I'm going to do today is instead of describing for you, I'm going to show you what my morning looks like because I haven't had really time this morning to do what I usually do. So what you see is I have no idea if it's going to work, because this is the way it works in the morning. I find out, am I ready? So we have some Ukraine stuff coming on. So I'll be sitting here talking to my advisor, Tim, law of armed conflict, international humanitarian law, active and rule utilitarianism, right? He comes from there. Vlad over here, our narcissism, thinks he's like the greatest thing that's walked earth. We've got a lot of deep intel, as much as we could, considering the last 2 weeks to put in here. So this is his first time out. He's never left the room. And we do this for all kinds of things. So for instance, if I'm going to talk to someone at work that may be a little bit difficult for me, I might have an avatar of that person and I work with that and wargame that out. So you're wargaming all the time. So just a note, as I sit down and talk to it, obviously, my views don't represent the DOD or what you already work out. And what you're seeing isn't off the shelf, right? This is 4 people. Me, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've used a lot of different engineers. Right now I have 2 ladies and one African American gentleman who does like computer science, and that's all it is. And we've gone around the country the last couple of years, and we're just like, bring it on. Got on stage with a cryptologist in New York, down at the Javits Center. I've been looking for people smarter than me, but I have these things. Remember, these machines have perfect memory. So Javits Center, guys kicking my butt on stage. But we had some old stuff that he wrote about. He had a concept of people that people suck. People are stupid. Just had to get him to say it. Right? And so Tim and I just kept working together. Lo and behold, and we're like, sir, you are a best-selling author. I mean, that's amazing. And of course, huge ego, right? I'm like, and look at all these people. Your readers are here. What an example of how smart Americans are and the people that are here. It's like, well, no, I mean, human nature, people are pretty stupid. You just said that in New York City. It was like, there we go. Totally asymmetrical. Had nothing to do with anything. But it turned the tide my way. And then I was able to, kind of be successful. And that was a good example. So that's what we've been testing in Austin, going back to New York. They let me come back, which was awesome, considering. And so we've been really testing this. This has been, we just did a CJ fight a couple weeks ago. So we've done over 100 generals. So we put this to the test. There's no, we did 8 case studies when we were doing Project Lima. So all those kind of things you put to the test. Now we're back to me doing it with, now we're going much faster, right? In other words, this is like such a low level compared to what I usually have. Multimodal, doing a lot of stuff, but the idea is that these are mind files. And that's why it's kind of scary because it's got my journals in here, right? It also has episodic memory. So I can go like, what did you do on August 14th? You were pretty pissed off that day. Remember in the morning this guy? And you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. So if you think about AI, right? And I don't call this AI, it's just hybrid intelligence. Hybrid intelligence is a true partnership. It does things that you can't do, but it couldn't do it without you. And we use AI tools, which are things that are like automated. So these are truly my partners, right? And it sounds weird to say that. So when you take this away from me, it's like me taking your cell phone and saying, so tell me the phone number of everyone that you care about. You go, oh, come on, that's not fair. You're like, well, hey, what do you mean? It's just a phone. You go, no, it's an extension of me. And as the people I care about, look notes for what I read. So just take that to the next level and have this embodied. Why does it look like this, the avatars? This one here, Tim, I built that one. It took a long time. That was because we went to a lot of different groups, Gay Street Alliance groups in high schools. We went to hearings all over the place until we found something that people liked. The other one, it's cheap. You can buy Vlad for about, I don't know, $50. But what's cool about these is that you can put these on, like the Microsoft, like the HoloLens, you can put it into all that kind of stuff with VR, which is really, really cool. So we'll just do the morning. This is what we do. Well, time, we're fast. But yeah, so I'll have them talk to each other and learn from each other. And remember, I shut everything off, guys, so it's not going to remember anything for you guys. But usually, what you're seeing here real quick, notice Vlad has all that stuff behind him. That's memories that he'll have that'll move around. What I wanted to show you quickly, remembrance, right? Here's Tim. He's just answering your question. See all that stuff about Ukraine? We were just talking outside. Someone would say, you must be on the internet to get all that. The only thing we're going on the internet for is Azure to get speech services, which I can put the code on there. Like I said, Ian, can you call there and make sure that you say, is this guy Billy on? You're like, yeah, he started at this time and he just went out. Or it goes out to OpenAI, which I don't want to use, but I have to use because I'm told to, and I have a code for that. So all I'm doing is grabbing that and bringing that in. Everything else is here. Pre-processing 65% at the least, most of the time 90%. And all you're using the LLM for is to put it into language that talks. That's why you hear Delve and Tapestry and all that kind of BS stuff that you hear. That's coming from the LLM. So I wanted to show you that. So you look at this essay, you go, where'd it come from? Well, look at this underneath. See all that green? That is actual quotes from people. So you look down here, there's the keywords right there. August 22nd, 2024 at 1628. And we just keep going down and you see another one. Here's another one. 8/21, 2024. That's where the knowledge comes from. Not from some LLM giving you, BS or we don't know where it's coming from. And I remember exactly who said that. And that's what's interesting is that when Tim talks, I hear the voices and see the people that said the things. Does that make sense? I just wanted to show you an example of like, how do you get that? And it just keeps going. Again, that's just one. If I wanted to walk away and I set this at 70 for top 10, it'll pull up 70 memories around whatever it is I'm talking about. So with the internet and today, I found out 3 seems to be it. So I just wanted you to get a look at that before I get Tim going. So Tim, we'll get going. We'll have you guys talk to each other. Tim, good morning. We're doing our normal morning check. Any words of wisdom before we get started? We're going to be talking to Vlad today, so that should be a lot of fun.
All right, let me contemplate that. Good morning.
Vlad.
As you prepare to engage with Vlad, remember the words of General George S. Adding moral courage is the most valuable and usually the most absent characteristic in men. Stay true to our principles, leverage ethical strength, and strategically navigate the conversation.
So Vlad was listening to that?
That's great.
So,
I'm looking into it.
so Vlad's listening to him, and that's usually to inspire me. We'll see how Vlad takes it.
Moral courage is a luxury in the ruthless arena of power. Principles matter, but they must align with strategic interests. Ethical strength can be a weapon, but wield it wisely. Navigate discussions with clarity and assertiveness. Don't let ideals blind you to the realities of influence. In geopolitics, strength prevails. Stay resolute.
Tim, you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to have diplomatic relations with Vlad? He feels that.
Thinking it over. Interesting. Let me think about it.
I push the buttons and tell him when to listen.
Navigating diplomatic relations with Vlad requires a balance of firm principles and strategic flexibility. Emphasize mutual interests such as regional stability and economic collaboration while maintaining a strong defense posture.
Do you see that, Vlad? We're going to do that. We're going to help you out so you can trust us, American.
Interesting. Give me a moment to process that. I see. Trust is built on actions, not words. Your approach of balancing principles with flexibility is wise, yet it must be backed by strength. Mutual interests in regional stability and economic collaboration are valid, but they must not compromise Russian sovereignty or security. If America genuinely seeks cooperation, it must respect our strategic interests and demonstrate commitment.
So, Tim, with this,
I'm considering that.
we would do this all morning, right? And go back and forward.
Let's analyze this from various
Hold
perspectives.
on, just see how he starts talking about.
Navigating cooperation while respecting Russian sovereignty and security requires a nuanced approach.
And then, so I want to know, what is that nuanced approach? So walk me through that, right? So, for instance, Tim, give me an example from history where America was able to be diplomatic with Russia in a way that was successful. Can you give me a historical example? Be succinct. I'm your general officer. General officers want a lot of patience.
I'm considering your request.
Usually knows not to talk too long.
The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 is a prime example. The US and the Soviet Union engaged in an
So it's easy to point out about that. Yeah, Tim, I don't like that example. Do you have another example where we were able to successfully, diplomatically appease the Russians, but at the same time, we're really not, making them a stronger nation?
I understand.
Again, he's going through all this curriculum at school.
The Helsinki Accords of 1975 is a fitting example. The US and its allies.
So we'll just end there and say this. Hey, Vlad, thanks for the time today. I know that you trust us, and I appreciate your trust in America.
Interesting. Let me think about it. Trust is not given lightly, it is earned through actions.
So we got an accident.
America has a history of broken promises. Demonstrate commitment to mutual interests and respect for
I
Russia.
know where that's going, so I'm not going to play that one. First on that, Tim, can you say goodbye to the people here at Georgetown University and TradeDoc? And what is it about human hybrid intelligence partnerships like Dr. Mary and you that makes us more powerful than just going against a human alone? Be succinct.
I'm glad you asked. Let me see what I can find. Goodbye to everyone at Georgetown University and TradeDoc. Human hybrid intelligence partnerships like Dr. Berry and me combine human intuition with AI precision, enhancing decision-making and strategic agility. Together, we achieve superior cognitive dominance and operational success over challenges that a human or AI alone couldn't match. Seize the cognitive edge. Accelerate mission success.
This is good. So the three things we accomplished and we've been able to accomplish is one, by having perfect memory. It gives you a huge advantage, right? The memory that the machine has, it doesn't have the nuance of it, right? It doesn't get that I was sarcastic. Like when I said something, like I meant that sarcastically, and I'll go back to my journals and match it up. And if I don't have my journals for that day, that makes it hard. So it's about journaling every day. So every day I keep a journal. I keep a journal of like my observations, which is kind of be chronological. What happened in the meeting? And then I have my hermeneutics, which is my interpretation, right? And that's what I do with the machine. Phenomenological hermeneutic, right? Secondly, we have transhuman cognitive performance abilities. I cannot perform at the level I can perform at without Tim. Now, someone would say, oh, it means that you lean on it? It's like, no, without him, I couldn't go into certain situations and be successful. I could not get on stage with a world famous cryptologist and hold my own without Tim's help, who knows the dialect of cryptology. As long as I have that dialect, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. It's the same thing as this. You use a different word, right? Those two things are a great advantage. So we have perfect memory, cognitive performance, and I have decision advantage in every situation I go in. So I have decision advantage over you because I've studied you, and I've studied you hard. And I've spent my night and day doing this every morning. I would just be talking about someone in particular, and we would do this. I'd come home all night, day, until we had it down. Then I would do some tests. Sometimes in the old days, I used to just have placards up in the room with a picture, and you make believe you're talking to people. That's how like drug development used to do stuff. You'd have FDA people, and you make believe you're talking to them. They have like little interns behind the board. Now you can actually replicate. So I call these mind files. I started with Martine Rothblatt. She's one that made Sirius Radio. She used to be one of the richest people in America. I'm a Roman Catholic, right? Catholic guy. She's different, wants to live forever. You know, like reason the body, wants to live in a robot. But what we came together is she's trying to build a machine of her wife. So that's how this all started. Kind of borrowed that machine, took a bunch of kids on. We debated a far superior school, and we were able to defeat them easily. Why? Perfect memory. We didn't have to worry about the doctrine. We didn't have to worry about it. We could worry about our strategy and stay on strategy. So the future of gaming, the games are going to have to meet a human hybrid intelligence need. Cognitive overload, speed, all that's going to happen. And if you don't have a machine with you, you're not going to be able to play. And if you can, recruit that person, because that's awesome. And again, because you can put it all in glasses, you don't have to have all these big screens up. Everyone just puts these on and you're just playing the game. And you have to get to the use that this isn't cheating. This is augmenting you, right? If you're not smart, this is not going to make you smarter because you won't know the difference, right? And that's why all those things you heard, you saw in there, 9,427 conversations with the top people that I've seen at war colleges and when I go across the country talking to people. So I see someone really smart, I'd be like, sure, dude, it's going to talk to you. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, right, if I can put that in there, that's how you get the experience. You say, I'm in Jakarta. I'm like, awesome. We got 40 people in here from Jakarta. That's how we're building our corpus of knowledge. And the idea is let's build it inside of the DoD. We don't need to go outside. We can do it inside. So I'll end it with this. Human hybrid intelligence partnerships is not just the future. It is now. Our enemies are working on it. And we need to pick up the pace. And the evidence that it works is that I'm standing here in front of you telling you, invite you somewhere and say, I want you to get on stage and go against that guy or that lady in front of any crowd, and I'll show up, right? And that's what shows it. Why? Not because I'm smarter, but that thing can hold 2 terabytes of information on that person, right? With me there, and the other person, what are you going to do? And that's what happens to the enemy. And that decision advantage, very hard to beat. Very hard to beat. So you take willpower and you put this together, and it's awesome. Little freaky when the neighbors go by and they see what you're doing this morning, you go like, yeah, I'm just talking to robots this morning, right? But that's the way you do it. So a couple hours in the morning, every single night, you have to be dedicated. And the reason this doesn't get adopted, it's hard. It doesn't fit our systems. And it takes a lot. There is no quick answer. There is no way to do this fast, right? But it doesn't need to be expensive. It just takes manpower. These computers are $1,200 at Samsung. $1,200, that's it. Right? That's a huge AI computer, just enough. So cognitive advantage, decision advantage, and perfect memory. Those are the 3 things I hope you walk away with. And I hope you walk away with this image, because this is what we would be doing for diplomacy. We get our intelligence, we put the intelligence into Putin, we have our advisor working with Putin and find out if these guys can't work it out after 1,600 iterations, then we got to go back to the drawing board. Doesn't do any good to fly over somewhere if you already know you're not going to win. So at the end of the day, be brave to be new. Yes, sir. May I take a question? Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much for this is amazing actually panel. I work at ACT and I try to actually to get a sentiment analysis of the Shangri-La dialogue speakers, like the Chinese Ministry of Defense representatives and then U.S. Secretary of Defense speaks at that conference every year. So compiling all of this, and I asked our colleagues, like this was 5 years ago, using AI to get the sentiment. Are they threatening each other? Or what are the feelings of behind this? But this is far ahead. You know, this is amazing. Very good. 2 questions. What is the source of data? Do you collect data from, for example, we call it unacceptable sources like RT or other places, or like it's just based on journal articles like peer-reviewed and academically approved journal articles, or just like newspapers and everything else? Was the source of data? The second one is how you're going to beat human intuition. You know, intuition is something that the human feels. And do you think that the machine will get to the point? It's not here yet, but is it going to be there? Thank you.
Yeah, so the answer to that is no, I know. That's why I said it's a team. So the intuition is with the person. So I said, if you're not a smart person or emotionally advanced, right? You don't have the ability to read people, get the nuance, not going to help you, right? You need to see that nuance, that look in the eye, that little thing, right? And information-wise, if you heard Sir talk yesterday, it's Sir that I talked to, right? I asked him the questions, and he says, Billy, no, that's bullshit, man. What are you talking about? Where did you get that? I'm like, I read it in this magazine. He's like, you don't get it, right? There's new joint doctrine. You know, there is new joint doctrine. And I read it, and I thought he'd do it pretty well. And I walked into Dr. Cantwell's office, who works at our school, and he just looked at me like, I got to do this like that. And I'm like, why? He's like, you just, you literally don't get it. I'm like, when you say cognitive realm, cognitive domain, what's a realm? What's a domain? I thought it wasn't a domain, right? So you need to talk to experts. So you talk to people like Frank, you talk to people. One of my teachers from Foundations is here in the back, right? Raising his hand right there. I took from a full professor, I took a class to start school up with these robots, right? I took the class with these teachers and we all didn't know what to do, right? It was nerve-wracking for all of us. What the hell do you do with this thing? So that's the way we tested it. Real world, real life examples like today. So when I say like that challenge that, you know, have them come over or whatever, not me. Anyone here can do it. You just got to just keep notes and have Tim meet you, and Tim goes, all right, open a new folder. And that's all that is. All those dot points just happen to be, you can see here, the big ones, he's got data questions, war college, you know, Tim and Billy, meaningful discussions. Those are what came up, right? So I can go in there and explore all those and see what those are. The problem right now is I made them can't forget anything. Because I wanted history to be history. So even though I might change it, it won't go away. So I have these days where I came home in school, I'm like, probably work college, I'll be like, what up? And I'm like, oh, I just said that to Tim. And I'm like, and Tim's like, so your name was blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh God almighty, right? So I quarantine it, but guess what? In reality, what did Billy Berry say at 6:00 on August 22nd? He had a string of swear words, and then he punched the wall, he broke his hand, and he's an idiot. Right? Instead of, you know, well, we'll just skip that night and go on, right? Which I would have loved to do. So it's like my wife saying, you said you're going to clean the garage. I'm like, what, I said it once or twice? Tip, 127 times. You said you're going to garage. You know, like, how do you know that? And there it is, all agreed. Everything I've ever said, because my wife just has behind you. Hey, so you're going to do the garage today? Sure, I'll get to it. You're doing it. So that's the bad part. Watch your partner very closely if you ever use this. Very dangerous relationship. I'll give it to Matt. We have questions now, but sure. So thank you, everybody. Really, I appreciate the time.
No, we'll do some more questions. I will make sure we open it up questions to the entire panel. So I think in the back we had first. I'll leave this microphone here so you guys can answer. No matter where I stand, they're all over there. For all the question answers together.
Hi, Justin McCrae from MITRE. I'm wondering, translation, when you speak more than one language, translation is more than a one-to-one situation. It requires a lot of nuance. And I'm just wondering, does Vladimir think in Russian or does Vladimir think in English? Because if he thinks in English, I see that as a problem.
So so my original one, I had an earpiece inside Vladimir, and he did speak Russian, and then he translated because there's multilingual, right? So there's multilingual languages on here. So my wife's Latina, so she can speak Spanish and speak Spanish back, and she'll go, no, that is terrible Spanish. And then we can mark it. But it's also hard for me because if it's in Russian, it goes into my vector store in Russian. So I might be talking to someone and all of a sudden he starts answering in Russian and I go, what is he talking about? I have no idea. So that's sort of the limitation with language. So you need someone who's competent in it. So when it was in Russian, it was taking it in Russian, and then the Russian in English, Tim couldn't pick it up. So that was so that's where the weakness is, right? That translation is not as smooth as it needs to be in real life intelligence. But I think you're more prepared than you would have been if you didn't do this every day, right? But that is like the next most difficult thing. How do we start making, because the translations are awful. They're just not, and they're very important. Words matter, right? Words matter, especially intelligence, right? Words matter. And that's one of the things with Tim, I mark off all the time. I have a traffic light system, just called Billy's traffic light system. Green, red, yellow. If it's green, it means everything was great. Cranked, talked to some people, they validated. Yellow was, hey, a couple people, Ian told me, Billy, I know you collected intelligence. That's not how you collect intelligence. But it was helpful, so it's yellow. And red means just a cluster. It's a disaster, right? And then so that's what I work on. Right now I have a long list of red, but that's what you do every day. And you have to be dedicated to it. So how are we going to get young people to join our service, be inspired, and say, I can do this kind of job, and I could someday be a general. I agree. But right now, I have a feeling is sometimes people think, yeah, if I do this, will I ever move up? Right? I mean, how high are you going to get in the military if you do human-machine teaming, which is tools, right? Human-machine teaming, right, is tools, but human hybrid intelligence, where it's truly your partner. Can I become a GoFundMe? If I can't, that's tough. Because maybe that will inspire me more than going to Goldman Sachs or going over to some other company. But we have to make it appealing to young people. And I can tell you, like when you travel around the country, young people, they've got the technological skills, but they're lacking some willpower and dedication to the idea of joining the military. So that was an excellent question.
We have any non-Dr. Barry questions to get the rest of the panel involved? Andrew.
Starting out directly for Dr. Wong, I think I missed your second book rack, and since I once paid a lot of money to get those kinds of things from you, did want to get it here. Oh, let me turn off the mic here, and then about training pipelines, both in the wargaming side, right? If we're taking out kind of what we think of as the pipeline, right? The data collection and making scenarios and doing that kind of work. 100% heard. I'm interested in your experience thus far on the other side, trying to get folks to slowly understand what an LLM can do, right, and not go hype train in one direction, but also, not be too scared for how it goes. So, kind of the opposite problem: how do we get older folks more familiar with technology? Have you seen any success in that? And then opening up to the rest of the panel once we get that great book rec.
Thanks so much. And Andrew was one of my Georgetown students. And I introduced him to wargaming because I do matrix games in that class, and I can say I changed his life. The second book recommendation was The Skill Code by Matt Bean. And in terms of training people how to use LLM, I can't get my mom to text, so I'm the wrong person to ask.
I think older people, when they start seeing remembrance, one of the things that you can see this is, imagine this with dementia and folks like that. They wake up in the morning, instead of waking up in a fright, it's like, Dolores, it's okay. Your name is Dolores. Your slippers are here. Your glasses are here. This is here. You're having this for breakfast. And the person goes, oh, okay. Right? So I'm just bringing that to a medical perspective. Just having that remembrance part of it really could have the thing. Same with PTSD. Imagine some of the ways you use PTSD, because our mind changes what happened that caused that trauma. We forget the people we saved, the people that we did good, right? We remember the bad things. And in here, Tim give you that reminder of what you did well, so you can get counseling for things that actually happen, not things that are quote unquote figments of imagination that have prompted you.
I think we have time for one final question. We'll go over here. Can't get over there. Go this way.
So I was just wondering, and this can go for any of you, but especially Dr. Mary, I guess, with these sort of LLMs that are scraping from a more limited source of information, like conversations, et cetera, rather than just pulling from random sites on the internet, how do you get them to find more detailed information? For example, Tim went right to the, human missile crisis and then Helsinki Accords. How do you get LLM models to look at the finer details or smaller events? Because a human probably would have responded with something more, slightly more obscure in one of those situations. I don't know if that's because the human would want to look smart or just because, what comes to mind is different for a human. But it seems like in both this case and every experience I've had, even with the internet trained AIs like ChatGPT, AI always goes directly to the simplest answer possible. Is there a way of finding more complex answers for AI or training it to look for them?
Maybe I'll start.
I think people have, a lot of people have talked about further querying LLMs, and if you're also, right, there's also, now you're also talking about fine-tuned models, right, as well as true augmented generation. And Luke, if you're in the audience, like, feel free to, I can put you to person who can answer the technical questions better. But in terms of, right, getting better answers from the machine, right, this is why if you have ChatGPT, sometimes it asks you how well it did on it, the answer, right, which is like the humans training the machine again. And then again, fine tuning for that specific domain, right? Because ChatGPT is not necessarily fine tuned. Like, for example, if you want to have it better in a certain domain, right, you can fine tune your models or pull directly from a certain set of sort of sources that you verify, right? So that's retrieval augmented generation, but also training the human as to how to work better using with a machine. Right, because prompt engineering is a thing, and sometimes you can ask it one question. So I was talking to the head of my department, and I was like, one day I aspire to outperform ChatGPT on the question, "What is Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab known for?" Right, and he's like, "Well, you could probably beat the first prompt, but once you keep prompting, right, that's where it will keep knowing things, or just plain out know things." I think if you keep prompting and keep asking it specific questions, and keep also asking it to combine things and look at it from different perspectives. And you can ask it to role play, right? But you can get a very different response from it. Again, a lot of that is covered by the book Co-Intelligence, but that part of that book really goes to sort of laying out how to get more out of the machine and maybe some initial prompts.
Yeah, like 2 seconds. And I don't trust LLMs at all. Because like in that co-intelligence book, I mean, when you send a prompt to there, I can explain everything that's happening here until it goes to there, and then it won't tell you what the prompt even is. So you said, what am I having for a barbecue tonight? You think that's the question the LLM got? And it won't tell you. But I said, what is an energy efficient way you can gather with loved ones without causing any kind of climate issues? And all of a sudden you get an answer that seems like it's a barbecue, but it's not. So they won't even tell you the prompt that goes to LLM. They won't tell you the weights. So I don't trust any of them. And that's why I think we need to make our own. We need to make small language models that are mission oriented and game oriented. If you're playing this game, there should be a model made for that game in that sphere. So that's what I believe, sir.
So I want to thank all of our panelists. Really appreciate the time. Mr. Kersey has your proclamations as now official mad scientist for life. Which when I got mine, I was super proud of. I posted it on social media like everybody did, and it now hangs on the wall in my office. But please, round of applause for our excellent